Right now, Australians are most people, they just think their super is going to be enough for them when they retire and they're going to go on overseas holidays and buy new cars and caravans. And it's just not the reality. Even if they've got some money in super, if they're renting, they're double. When Labor started talking about unrealized capital gains tax, this was like an awakening for people.
That's how it starts. Oh, it's right now just to the rich people. It's always first the rich people, they make them the enemy, and then it affects everyone.
The average Joe in Australia who might have 1 or 2 investment properties, they can see the writing on the wall and they're getting the
Should business owners save company profits in Bitcoin?
People should go immediately to Google a gentleman called Michael Saylor. What he realized was I've actually signed over, Nelson, $1 million in tax in a single year. When you have to do that, then you start really waking up.
With the current trajectory of Australia, are we?
I laugh, but it's looking pretty bleak. It really is looking pretty bleak.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today's guest has been on the podcast previously, and we discuss all his background story, how he got into business, how he made millions. But today, it's a bit of a different episode. And he's one of our legendary podcast partners, actually now even business partner. And he's an 8-figure entrepreneur. He has done over 70 million in e-commerce sales. For the last year, he has been selling all his business assets and property to go all in into this one thing, Bitcoin. And he's now on a mission to help 100,000 Australians build wealth through Bitcoin and SMSF. Please welcome the legend, the absolute incredible Matthew Fraser.
What an introduction. Checks in the mail. Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me on, Nelson.
You have made millions of dollars in business, and you have had a lot of success in real estate investing. You have had the nice cars, a car collection, the nice house, but you decided to get rid of all of those things to go all in into Bitcoin. Why?
Such a good question. And I think you kind of go on this journey with Bitcoin. You know, you sort of start dabbling. And when I mean dabbling, Nelson, it's you buy a little bit. Then you speak to somebody else, then you read a book, then you watch some more YouTube videos. And next thing you know, you gain more conviction in the asset. You start understanding how powerful the asset is. And it becomes less of a I'm in it for the money and more of I'm in it for the revolution of changing the monetary system and being outside the current broken fiat system, right? And of course, this leads to things like, you start off buying Bitcoin with your surplus money, like on a day-to-day basis out of your pay. And then you start looking around and you think, this asset over here, a property, for example, is, yielding 4 or 5% a year. And I'm dealing with tenants, insurance, government control, repairs and maintenance, and the list goes on. And you think, why have I got my money tied up in that asset when I could have it sitting in the number one performing asset over the last 15 years, which is Bitcoin? And so what you then start to understand as you go further down the rabbit hole is Bitcoin actually gives you mobility. Now, I speak to people all the time about this exact thing. I'm speaking to people, in fact, Nelson, this will blow you away. I've actually just recently created this inner circle program for high net worth individuals and people who just want to break out of the matrix, right? Who want to essentially what I call now dematerialize physical assets and allocate into Bitcoin. There was one guy I spoke to the other day, literally, and this is going to blow listeners away. He has a worth of $500 million. He's calling me. Right? Why is he calling me? Because the message that I'm delivering resonates with him. What is that? Dematerializing physical assets and creating a life of mobility with less government control and oversight, with more privacy, right? There's a number of things that obviously gets to him, but this is across the range with a lot of people, is the taxes. When Labor started talking about unrealized capital gains tax, this was like an awakening for people. They're like, holy shit, they can actually steal our money and we haven't even sold the asset. We're holding an asset And if it goes up in value, there's a gain. And the government wants to come in and steal part of that gain without you even selling that asset. People are scrambling now all over Australia, either to get out of certain assets into Bitcoin because of the attributes that it has, and also to potentially even escape the matrix out of Australia. And they're now talking about Plan B passports and these types of things. So it's an absolutely massive issue. And the range of people that I'm speaking to, I guess because I now talk about it on social media, like just on podcasts like this, even in my own crypto collective channel, people are resonating with that message. They're reaching out to me saying, Matthew, you've sold your car collection, you're selling your properties, you're allocating into Bitcoin, you've got the conviction. Tell me what I need to know. And so that's where I'm there to help.
That was absolutely insane when I saw the news of the unrealized capital gains tax. Because coming from a third world country like Venezuela, that's how it starts. It's like, oh, it's right now just to the rich people, and they make rich people the enemy. Oh, no, it's just to them. It's whoever has over 3 million in super and all these things. But then people don't realize that with inflation, right now this is taking place, but in 10 years, most people will have $3 million. It'll be like the equivalent to what it is, 1 million right now.
Yeah.
So it's hurting people in the future. They just don't realize it yet. But also, what stops them from one day just saying like, hey, you know what? Let's take it down to 1 million. Now, if you have 1 million, now we go after that, right? So it always starts like that. It's always first the rich people, they make them the enemy, and then it affects everyone. They just lower the threshold,
Well,
right?
this is the exact conversation I had with this gentleman, the $500 million man, let's call him. This is the exact thing. And, someone like him, you don't get to $500 million by accident, right?
No.
You're taking risks. I no doubt you've probably been through a lot of financial hardship. You're taking making a lot of sacrifices, okay? And then at the end of the day, the government turns around all of a sudden, changes the goalposts, and then starts pointing at these people who have done well, who are successful, and says, they're the enemy, right? And this is the socialist communist doctrine. And people like the $500 million man, they see the writing on the wall too, right? Not just a guy with $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. They're seeing it as well. But even the what I call the ultra wealthy people, and that's why there's yet going to be a huge flight of capital. But what our $500 million man also realizes that, hang on a second, I've got my assets tied up in properties, majority properties and business. I can't just pick those up and leave. So they've got to start this process of actually liquidating those assets, turning it into Bitcoin because it's of its mobility attributes. And of course, there's a range of other attributes, which of course I can go deep into, but that's the fundamental thing. And ultimately, it becomes about freedom.
Now, for business owners that are yet to get into this asset, what is Bitcoin?
God, this is like a massive rabbit hole now. I guess fundamentally, Bitcoin is a store of value. People liken it to the digital gold. It's a new monetary system. It's a network. It's an energy force. It's a technology. It's all those things wrapped up in one. And I guess you've got to start with, why do we even need Bitcoin? And I don't want to go into too much detail here, but fundamentally, the current monetary system that we all participate in through, I guess, force, we have to participate in it, is the fiat system. And this is a debt-based monetary system. And why is it broken? Because you've got currency debasement. Now, think of it this way. At the moment, the government prints money. So the more money they print into the system, the less valuable the actual cash you hold is worth, right? And you can see that at the checkout. People recently can really see it through a lot of inflation. So you go to the checkout, you go to the shops, I guess before COVID, you could basically fill half a trolley for $100. Now when you go to Woolworths or Coles, and it's not because they're jacking up the prices, this is because of inflation, right, in the system, you've got like 4 things and it's like $100. People cannot survive on this. Now, this all now comes back to, if I can say, like superannuation, right? People are now in my age bracket, mid 40s and 50s. They're thinking about super, and we're going to get to super later. But so this is the reason why people are looking for an alternative monetary system to allocate their current rubbish fiat cash into, which is now Bitcoin. And of course, fundamentally, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer transaction system. So I can transact with you, Nelson, through the blockchain, which of course is the Bitcoin blockchain, the network. And so people have now, and this has of course been around for like 16 years. It's been the best performing asset as of course it grows with adoption. So there's more people now adopting to it. Nation states, governments, obviously companies are now buying up Bitcoin. Even in Australia, just this year, Nelson, AMP Bank bought $26 million worth of Bitcoin. This is not a fringe thing anymore, right? The United States government has now integrated this into the system. They've obviously created a lot of legislation around Bitcoin. They want to be the Bitcoin and I guess crypto superpower of the world. And you cannot corrupt the system of Bitcoin. This is why people have gravitated to Bitcoin as opposed to any other type of crypto. Bitcoin is like the Mac Daddy with a 2 trillion plus market cap, right? It's overtaken a lot of things in the market cap world. And there's only 21 million. It's hard capped. You can never print any more than 21 million Bitcoin. Unlike fiat currency, you can print that all day, every day and debase the currency. So I've just touched on some of the attributes of Bitcoin, but I certainly encourage people to look more into Bitcoin. They can read books and what have you. And also listen to my podcast where I go into much more detail.
In Australia, property investing has been the go-to way of building wealth. In your opinion, is property a scam and business owners should be investing in Bitcoin instead?
I'm not saying what to do. So people listening to this like, what's he going to say? I'm currently in the midst of selling off all properties. So I've already sold a commercial property at the beginning of the year. I've got 2 more commercial properties that I've got contracts on right now, which will settle over the next 30 days and 60 days. I've just moved my mother-in-law out of a residential property. She's just coincidentally, she's moved into an old age facility, let's call it that, like a retirement facility. And I'm going to sell that residential. Then I'll be left with my owner occupied home. And I'm sure at some point that's going to have to go too, but I've also got a fixed business. So I would not do that. I would not put money into property again. Now, the reason why though, it's not just because, Bitcoin's great. That's the Bitcoin is great. And it's the best asset to allocate to at the moment. And I believe it will be the best asset to allocate to well into the future. I'm talking like hundreds of years. Okay. It's not like, it's good this year. But there's other reasons why I'm dematerializing out of property in particularly. One is the returns are just not there. The insurances, you have to deal with tenants, the repairs, right? What it actually is, it becomes a headache. It takes away mind power and mind. What's the word I'm looking for? It takes away mental space that I've got to now think about all this sort of stuff. Because I guess all through Australia, we always get taught about building up a property empire. And as a kid, that's what I thought about. It's not until you get it that you realize, actually, now I actually need like someone to manage all the properties. So it just becomes this big mammoth thing that you got to think about. And aside from all that, Nelson, it becomes an anchor, right? So it's not mobile, unlike Bitcoin, for all the reasons I mentioned before, even with our $500 million man. They want to get out of property because when you move out to a different country, and I'm looking at a tax-free country like Dubai to move to, you can't just pick up your property and take it with you. You can't pick up your wealth of properties and take it with you, right? It's just, you can't do it. You can do that with Bitcoin.
What about shares versus Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm. I do have some shares, but it's only a very, very small allocation, right? So I'm allocated in the AI space. So I have Tesla shares. I've got Tesla shares. Actually, I've got 2 Tesla shares and Strategy, which is of course formerly known as MicroStrategy, which is really just another proxy play on Bitcoin. Now, in my overall portfolio, it's very, very, very small. It's probably like 1%. So the majority of my wealth now is in Bitcoin. And once I formally settle on these other properties, that it'll be even more money in Bitcoin.
Now, you mainly had this entire property investing portfolio, right? Worth millions of dollars. Roughly how much was it worth?
It wasn't really that much, Nelson. In altogether, it's probably upwards of 10 million.
10 million, right? And in comparison, what have been the returns that you have gotten from $10 million worth of property investing versus Bitcoin?
Well, let me just say this for people because it doesn't matter what I've got. What can anyone else sort of compare it to? So right now you've got a property that's growing on average, let's say 7% a year in Australia. That's property as a whole. You've got the stock market. You know, if I think about superannuation, for example, most of your super is in the stock market. That grows at about 7, 8, 9. If it's really high growth, it might be 11, 12. That might be a great year. But on average, let's say 8 to 9%. Bitcoin right now has a CAGR, which is a compound annual growth rate, for the last 5 years of nearly 60%. Right, that's the last 5 years. And then over the last decade, it's up around 80%. So it's quite extraordinary, the growth rate of Bitcoin compared to other assets. Now, there's a reason why companies around the world or investors around the world are allocating to Bitcoin, because they're not stupid, right? They can look at, I can be like in the S&P 500 and I can get 13%, or I can allocate it to Bitcoin and I'm probably going to get a minimum of 50%. That's it, 13% or 50%. And the risk factor right now is actually having no allocation to Bitcoin. People often say to me, oh, Matt, Bitcoin's too volatile, it's too risky. Yeah, you're right. It is volatile, but volatile is the vitality of Bitcoin, right? So not only, and look, for sure, in the past, it has had drawdowns of up to 70% in the 4-year cycles, but it also has upside in the hundreds and hundreds of percent, right? So over the long term, you're not going to get into Bitcoin to get out in a week, get in and out in a week, right? That's playing the market. And so what you find in Bitcoin, much like I guess you could argue with properties, it's time in the market, not trying to time the market, like timing the market, right? So Bitcoin is a long-term play. For me, I'm just going to buy and hold.
Now, in relation to that, what's the risk of owning zero Bitcoin?
Well, the risk of owning zero Bitcoin is you're not allocated to the number one performing asset. So while people like me and I know you've got an allocation to Bitcoin too, Nelson, we are going to completely outstrip the returns of anyone else that does not have Bitcoin. And so even if you had let's say your overall investment portfolio was $1 million, you could just simply pick, and it's funny because over the years recently, the investment bankers and financial advisors, I guess, particularly in the States, because they kind of talk about it on some of the TV shows, they talk about allocation, of your overall portfolio. It started off, I remember just even probably 3 years ago, maybe you should allocate 1% of your overall net wealth. Then it's turned into maybe you should allocate 5%. And now it's basically a minimum 20%. Some people are even, then these are like big sort of hedge fund kind of guys. Maybe you should actually allocate 50% because they're doing the maths. And now because of the regulation, the positive government regulation around the world, not so much in Australia, I might add, it's not really pro Bitcoin in Australia, and we can sort of go into that later, but certainly in other nations, El Salvador, United States, clearly, which is obviously the superpower of the world, when they kind of lead the way, other countries start to follow suit. And so that's why all these big investors now have all changed their tune, even BlackRock, right? BlackRock, one of the biggest fund managers in the world. Now, whether you like BlackRock or not, I'm just telling you, they have a huge allocation now to Bitcoin through their ETF, which is called IBIT. So it's another Bitcoin proxy. It's where people can invest, sort of buy shares, and the shares are backed by Bitcoin. So it's another way to get an allocation to Bitcoin without actually buying Bitcoin directly. However, if you're thinking about you want to have mobility, you want to have privacy, you want less government control, you don't want government seizure of your Bitcoin, then you fundamentally must own Bitcoin and in my opinion, in self-custody, which means that you hold possession of the Bitcoin. That's probably another attribute that we sort of skipped over, but that's why it creates the mobility, because you own the asset. Imagine a $500 million man dematerialize his businesses, his property portfolio, and just put $500 million into Bitcoin, right? He could just pick up himself out of Australia, walk into another country, straight through the airport, no checks, no nothing. He's now in a whole nother country, and he's still got the same amount of wealth, which is currently compounding at 50+%. Now, even just in the last year, Nelson, Bitcoin has grown 100% in the last 12 months. I mean, it's quite staggering.
You did something that most people would think that is absolutely crazy. You move your entire retirement funds into Bitcoin. In Australia, we have this thing called Super, and that's how essentially everyone builds their retirement funds to one day being able to retire. You decided to move your entire retirement funds into Bitcoin. Why and how did you do that?
Well, the tagline for this video is no doubt going to be, this guy's crazy. He moved his entire superannuation into Bitcoin. Now, I admit for most people, they're going to be shocked at this. When I speak to people about it, they're like, what, you moved all? Well, actually, I will admit lately it's more like, wow, how did you even do that? I didn't even know you could do that. And then the penny starts to drop for these people. Hang on a second. I can get my super out of a rubbish retail or industry fund, which is, like I said before, let's say 9% average. And I can allocate that to Bitcoin, which is currently at a CAGR of 50+% a year. I'm like, yes, it is. You can do that. And it's not even a mystery of how to do it, so to speak. It's like the ATO allows you to do that. So you're not doing anything wrong within the current, Australian government landscape and ATO landscape. So you can do that. The thing is though, when I first did it, not many people were doing it. And I had to figure it all out on my own. And so I got to admit, Nelson, once I started doing it, I'm obviously telling people about it. Hey, this is what I've done, because I like to talk to people about it. And then what I found is, you know what? There's so many people that need to know about this. So I started an online community fundamentally based around Bitcoin and how to allocate your superannuation into the best performing asset with literally a step-by-step guide. Now, I started this like a couple of years ago, and it's now grown to over 1,500 Australians who are all now on this journey and trying to seek answers, like seek the truth and set themselves up for the best retirement they can possibly have. Because right now, I hate to tell you, Nelson, am I allowed to say fucked?
Yes, you can.
Australians are fucked if they stay in the current superannuation system. Now, not only because the returns are so bad, right, considering the currency debasement and inflation, they're just not going to be able to survive when they get to retirement. This is most people. I met someone the other day, same age, is actually a little bit older than me, nearly 50, right? $180,000 currently in super. And I said, dude, you're fucked unless you do something. And the problem is, Nelson, most people in Australia is kind of ignore super. And I admit, I didn't focus on super really either, but that's because I was building businesses. And as someone who's self-employed, you have to manually pay yourself super. Okay. Most people just don't do it who are in small business, but I was also growing wealth outside of the super. So even if I had zero super, I was going to end up retiring with like a property portfolio or something, right? That was the idea. But most people who are doing a 9-to-5 job, they just think their super is going to be enough for them when they retire, and they're going to go on overseas holidays and buy new cars and caravans. And it's just not the reality. Most people now are going to have to live off the pension, right? Even if they've got some money in super, if they're renting, they're double fucked. Okay. So that's why people now have to take action. And I guess this is my mission in life now, which has become, I want to help like 100, you mentioned in the beginning, like, 100,000 people in Australia to have a decent retirement through Bitcoin. Of course, not financial advice. They have to go and do their own research, but this is a strategy and a way. And I'm not talking about, hey, like I heard of this strategy. I'm actually doing it. I'm putting all I'm taking the risk, so to speak, right? I'm laying the foundation. And this is coming from someone who owned a multi-millionaire property portfolio, who's made many, many millions of dollars through business. I've done all the research. You go do all the research too. And when you start looking at the fact that you've got this much super and you're going to have to live on the pension when you retire, if you can retire, right now they're already talking about you can't even get on the pension until 70. Right? That's what they're talking about now because the government's ran out of money. Okay. So they're going to keep you working. You're going to have to work until you're probably 80 or 90. Yeah, unless you make a change. So that's what the group's been put together for, is to help people make the decision for themselves. And actually in that group, I help with guidance of, who are the accountants to speak to? Who should I speak to about getting an SMSF? Right, this is one of the number one things that people are like, hey, who do I go and see? And so what I've actually done is I've partnered with the number one SMSF expert team in Australia. These guys have incredible reviews, rave reviews. I provide in there a white glove service. So people can help get the full setup, fully compliant, so that you can allocate to Bitcoin, plus also helping you with the bank setup, helping you with the crypto exchange setup. One of the number one crypto exchanges, fully compliant with SMSF, which is the one that I go to, which is actually CoinStash.
Now, for people that don't know, what's an SMSF?
I just put out these lingos now, don't I? So SMSF, self-managed super fund. So what this does is, at the moment, you've got a superannuation account that is basically you have no control over. Now, when I say no control, you might have an opportunity to allocate from low risk to high risk, but you can't go to the super fund and say, hey, can you just buy some Bitcoin for me in the fund? You just can't do it. They just don't have the parameters to do that. So the only way for you to allocate to the number one and best performing asset, which is Bitcoin, is to actually pull your superannuation out into what's called the self-managed super fund. So you have complete control over it, and then you allocate those funds to Bitcoin. So you literally buy the Bitcoin in the superannuation fund.
Now, in terms of allocating to Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin, you mentioned a few things now, from you buying Bitcoin, using an SMSF to buy Bitcoin. What are all the different ways in which you're buying Bitcoin?
I've got multiple ways. To keep it really simple, I've got 3 buckets. So I have an SMSF, and every single month I pay myself a wage through my own business. And I therefore have to, by law, allocate some of that funds into superannuation, right? Which I therefore allocate to Bitcoin. So I've got a strategy of every month buying Bitcoin in the self-managed super fund. Second to that, I have a business, I have a company, and it's an operational company that's generating cash flow. And because I have a surplus of cash flow every single month that I don't really need, I allocate that to Bitcoin. So you could say I've got a Bitcoin treasury within my own company. Thirdly, I've also got a wage that I obtain through my business. And so from time to time, and even sometimes things I sell around the house, Nelson, just for the people listening, they're thinking, I don't want to allocate to Bitcoin, I don't have any money. Well, here's one of the strategies that you could even do yourself. I had an exercise bike. I was going to the gym now. I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to use that exercise bike. This is a $2,500 bike that I actually sold on Gumtree or something. I'm like, you know what? I'm happy to sell it for $2,500 to put that money into Bitcoin. So because I've now got money that's in my personal name, I've then created a personal stash of Bitcoin too. So you've got the 3 buckets there. Now, there's another level to this, which is Bitcoin mining. So another way in which I obtain Bitcoin. And that's a whole nother story. And if people want to go back to my Crypto Collective YouTube channel, there's actually videos specifically on crypto or Bitcoin mining and how I obtain Bitcoin completely passive 365 days of the year.
So you have Bitcoin on your personal name. You have Bitcoin under your self-managed super fund. You mine Bitcoin and you also own Bitcoin on your company.
One might say I'm actually all in.
Yeah, but like it really is all
I'm
in.
obsessed.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, real quick, if you're a founder, CEO, or business owner looking to build a personal brand, become a thought leader in your space, and attract premium leads, our viral video podcast systems can help. Book a call with the link in the show notes to speak with my viral podcast team today. Now back to the episode. Speaking to business owners, should business owners save company profits in Bitcoin?
Well, here's the thing. If we go back to a gentleman called Michael Saylor, who's the owner, let's call him, of what was used to be called MicroStrategy, now called Strategy. So people should go immediately to Google after this episode and type in Michael Saylor and watch everything he's ever said. This guy had a software company, still owns a software company. And what he realized was he had, and don't quote me on the numbers, but he had something like, $5 billion sitting in cash as a part of his company, and realized that the cash was getting eroded away through inflation every single year. And it was like a lot. I think it was even over like 10% a year, right? So imagine if you've just got all that money and it's becoming worth less and less and less and less. Why? Not because the money itself, the number was going down. It's because everything else outside in the world, the prices were going up. So what he could buy was less every single year. And it was a massive problem. So what he ultimately ended up doing was allocating all of this surplus cash he had sitting in his company bank account and moved it all into Bitcoin. And that's to protect the asset, protect his wealth. And so what's happened in that time is, of course, Bitcoin has continued to grow at a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of over 50%. So do the maths on that. Is whatever it was worth, 5 billion, it's now worth whatever billion, 10 billion, 20 billion, right? And so that's fundamentally why companies should allocate to Bitcoin within their company, because they want to protect their wealth.
And a common question that I'm guessing they will have as well, and you're obviously not an accountant, but how does this play out in regards to taxes having Bitcoin under your company?
Right. Well, first of all, any profits that you make within the company, just generally as an operational company, you're going to have to pay tax on whatever your net amount is. You'll pay tax on the net profit. Or you pay tax on the gross profit and then you get a net profit. But when you allocate to Bitcoin, you're simply buying an asset. It'd be the same as buying a property, buying shares. And so that's not a taxable event, right? The only taxable event once you've purchased the Bitcoin, at the moment, the government may change any second and come and steal it. But right now, you only pay tax if you sell Bitcoin, okay? Now, we've spoken in the beginning about why people are wanting to pack up and leave Australia and get out of the system, because of course there was the current toxic Labor Party who's trying to bring in this unrealized capital gains tax. Now, let me just say this, Nelson, and this is the conversation I have with the plumber all the way through to property developers, which is that if the Labor Party is so insidious to think that they can bring in an unrealized capital gains tax on people's superannuation, their retirement savings, and steal it without them even selling the asset, okay? What's to stop them from saying, you know what, we're going to now roll this into companies, company treasuries. We're going to roll it into trusts. We're going to now bring this across now just properties in general. There was even something that was floated to me yesterday by a person who I had a one-on-one call with, and they were absolutely petrified because the Victorian Labor Party, the Socialist Victorian Labor Party, is talking about bedroom tax. So if you have a spare bedroom, the spare bedroom tax, they're talking about bringing in taxes on the family home, which has traditionally been in Australia an absolute no-go area. And there was even now talk, and I haven't had this verified, so I know the comments are going to go crazy now, that's rubbish. But these types of things are being floated all the time, which was that they take 100% of the gain that you might see in a property. You buy a property for 500,000, and let's say 10 years later it's worth $1 million. The government's going to take the 500,000. I mean, now if that comes in, I mean, there would be a mass exodus. I mean, it would be astonishing. So this is the big problem right now. So people, that's why they want mobility. You see, they want to get rid of their physical assets and put into Bitcoins because of the mobility in case a tyrannical Labor Party, which is what we've seen right now, wants to start bringing an unrealized capital gains tax on just everything. And so that's why Bitcoin could be at risk, but there's less risk because you can pack up and move it away, right? Properties would be absolutely decimated. You would continually have to pay an unrealized capital gain tax on properties. And how do people pay? So people are thinking, this is what happens, Nelson. People say, well, those rich people, they can afford to pay the tax. And they've had all these tax breaks. You know, they don't even pay enough tax, of course, right? Which is complete garbage. Imagine you've got a property that's increased in value by $100,000 in a year and the tax is 30%. So you now owe 30% tax, not because you've sold the property, but because it's just simply gone up on paper. You haven't realized the profit by selling it. We haven't realized the gain. The problem with this is now, how do you now pay the tax? Well, you either have to find the $30,000 lying around somewhere in your back pocket and pay the tax, or you're going to have to sell the asset. You can't sell $30,000 worth of the property to pay the tax. You see? So you're gonna have to sell the entire asset to now pay the tax if you don't have the tax money sitting outside the property, right? The whole thing is completely unbelievable. And that's why so many people are basically flocking into the crypto collective group. You know, as I said, property developers, builders, plumbers, you know, even just the average Joe in Australia who might have one or two investment properties, they can see the writing on the wall and they're getting the fuck out.
Serious question. With the current trajectory of Australia and the world, with the current money system, business owners work so hard to create value for countries, for society, to create jobs, to move the economies. And ultimately, you're always the one taking all the risk. The government rarely helps you. In fact, the more you grow, the more success you have, it's almost like the more you get penalized for it, the more new taxes you have to pay, as well as you cross certain thresholds. And again, you're always on the brink of losing everything as well. Are we fucked?
I laugh, but it's looking pretty bleak. It really is looking pretty bleak. I spoke to a gentleman yesterday. I had a one-on-one call with him. He said, Matthew, I'm thinking about starting up a clothing business. I said, whatever you do, do not do that. Now, mainly because it's so difficult in Australia. One, it's just difficult to, first of all, before you even pay taxes, you've got to even sell the product. Okay, so you've got to add value. People have got to want your product. That in itself is difficult, right? Most businesses, as you know, fail. And I've had businesses that haven't succeeded. So don't get me wrong, I'm not sort of like genius. But I've seen so many businesses now of startups and people who, because I come from the Amazon world of selling products on Amazon. So I speak to a lot of people in that realm, online business. And my advice to them now is don't even start the business, dude. If you've got money, because a lot of these people have got some capital they might want to allocate to the new business. I'm like, look, just stick to a day job, which is risk-free. Just rock up and do your job and get paid. But allocate that money that you've got, that wad of cash you've got, and put it into Bitcoin. But on top of all that, even if you do, you kick off a business that actually starts to generate income, you now have to pay taxes. Now you've got to do, you generate more value to the world, you make more money, and all of a sudden you start realizing, I've actually signed over, Nelson, $1 million in tax in a single year. Now, when you have to do that, you're like, it's insane, right? Then you start really waking up and thinking, why am I even paying all this tax out for? What is the government's not even spending it well, right? And you see all these people, I guess I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here, but people, I guess, who don't deserve the tax money, programs and policies that just are stealing the wealth from everyday citizens who are trying to get ahead. And so we do need business in Australia. That's the problem. But the government just makes it extremely difficult to operate. And that's why I guess a lot of people love the idea of an online business that they can operate in a jurisdiction just like Dubai, where you actually pay next to no taxes. So you can continually reinvest the money, grow your wealth there. A place like Dubai, Nelson, just so people can understand, they actually want you to move there if you have money. They encourage you to move there. Do you think Australia encourages wealthy people to bring their wealth here to spend it in Australia? They don't. It's basically, if you've got nothing and you're at the bottom of the barrel, please come in. Please come to Australia. We want you. Dubai's not like that. If you've got nothing to add to the country, they don't want that. So why do we do that to ourselves? It's like it's a deliberate destruction of the country. That's what it feels like.
And as an immigrant myself, now I see things very different going from someone that came to this country with absolute nothing, but the most amount of hunger to provide and to add value to this country and this economy and to earn his place. Nothing was handed to me personally. I had to really earn my spot here. And at this point, I'm paying a fuck ton of taxes too. And it, just like you said, you have paid, $1 million in 1 year, but even if you have paid hundreds of thousands, if the government takes that money at a compounding of 10%, which is very shit now, that's millions that they're stealing from you. For what? Because then you don't see that improvement around the country at the same level that you're paying as well, right? So it becomes like you now have this really expensive employee that adds no value to the company.
No risk.
Zero risk. But is there to collect.
Yes.
Right? Is there always ready to collect, and you miss a payment and you better get ready.
Let me tell you a story.
Go.
Now, this goes back to 2014. I was having a conversation with a self-proclaimed socialist. And I was telling them, and you would know these people from your country, perhaps, but this is an Australian socialist. And I was talking to him about the business that I was operating at the time. It was a restaurant business. And we got talking about pays for people, the pay that I pay the employees. And he said, you know what? Any profit that you make must be shared with the employees. And I looked at him and I said, okay, well, what if I make a loss? Do I have to share that with the employees as well? Oh, no. We don't want to share the loss.
Not the loss.
No. We only want to share in the profit. But I said, but you're not taking on any risk. I'm borrowing the money from the bank. The bank's their heavy hand on me. The tax man's got his heavy hand on me. I'm the one that's opening and closing the business. I've got to make sure that all the insurances are paid and the taxes are paid and et cetera, right? All the employee has to do, and bless them, we want people to, I've been an employee too, right? But the employee has got it so good. All they have to do is wake up, put a smile on their face, walk into the business, perform their job, and go home. And that's it. They don't have to go and think about all the other things. And so because as a small business operator, you do take on all those extra things, that's why you get rewarded if you can make a profit and you don't have to share your wealth with the employees who take no profit. Because if employees want to start sharing in the profit, changes the whole dynamic. That becomes business partner. And the other thing that those employees wouldn't want to do, if you said, let's share the profit, is I say, well, look, you put some money in as well. You put some capital into the business. Oh, no, we don't want to do that.
It's too risky, man.
It's too risky for us. Yeah, you take all the risk. And when you make some money, share it with us, please.
Yeah. Honestly, it kind of part of me, it's really frustrated and annoyed because it took me about 8 years to earn my place here, go from completely broke to, making money and all these things. And
Well, let me say that you've become what I see is the Australian success story. The Australian, yes, immigrants. Yeah, we're built on immigrants, but you're the type of immigrant that we want here. Someone who comes here, who actually picks themselves up, says, I'm going to make it here in Australia, does the shitty jobs that you've done, like we've all done, then finds a business niche. So you think, you know what, I could do this to add value. And of course, people don't know this about you, but you actually are a qualified dentist from Venezuela. So you've got this skill that most people don't have, a high level skill as well. But even then, when you came here, you couldn't just go into the dentistry office because you didn't have the same qualifications, right? You had to get re-qualified basically. But you started at the shitty jobs, you built yourself up, and I'm so proud of you actually, because I think of you as someone who's like, this is a success story, and it doesn't matter where people come from. That's what I love, is seeing the people who just get in, get the job done, don't complain, except on the taxes, but no, really turn their life around, and I think become an inspiration for many people.
now, in terms of your private community, you have a community now of, at the time of this recording, over 1,500 Australians in there. What's the most common mistake that you see people make when it comes to getting into Bitcoin?
I think the common mistake is overestimating their abilities surrounding the asset. And I think getting yourself in the room with other like-minded people who have been on this journey for a bit longer is key. I want to share another story with you, Nelson, because this is clear cut. When I first got into the Bitcoin crypto space, I had already had success with investing in myself through a VIP training program. It was called Platinum Partners through Amazon training. I didn't have any money. I was absolutely stone broke. Like, I was living on credit card. I was driving Uber around to try and make ends meet. So I was stuffed. Okay. And I had to find something else to do. But there was something I just said, look, you know what? I need to fast track this. I need to get into the right room with the right people and learn from people who are successful in this space. I shelled out over $20,000 at the time on credit card, right, to get in the room. That obviously has yielded me over $70 million in sales. So of course, when I look back now, I don't even think about the 20 grand, do I? It was the best investment that I've ever made in my entire life. Okay, not university, nothing like that, just this 20 grand. Now, because I'd seen success with that, when I decided to get into the crypto Bitcoin space, I was like, you know what? I don't want to make mistakes. I want to learn from someone who's already been down this track already. So I spent another $20,000 on VIP training in the crypto space. My friend, however, also came in around the same time, didn't want to spend the $20,000 on training. The number one thing that they taught me in the very beginning, so people can write this down, is how to protect your Bitcoin. There's scams everywhere, okay? You can mess this up if you press the wrong buttons. This is a digital asset, okay? You're not holding it in your hand. So it can be messed up, right? So because I spent that $20,000, everything has been, to date, touch wood, completely fine. I took the right measures to make sure I had the right security in place. My friend, however, didn't invest in himself, ultimately put $50,000, his entire life savings, into a particular exchange over in some foreign country, didn't de-risk and take the right security measures. That company in Europe ended up going bust. And in a matter of seconds, lost his entire life savings because he didn't understand the risks and take the right security measures. So that just gives you a clear example of why people really, really should, one, come into the free community that I provide, get around other like-minded people. And even in there, Nelson, I've got actual little classrooms on, hey, what should I do, how to de-risk and take the right security measures? Who is the right platform I should contact to buy Bitcoin rather than some other dodgy overseas platform? Okay. And of course, I have the number one crypto exchange in Australia, which is one that I've partnered with. They're literally based in Brisbane. I've met the guys there. They're the number one SMSF partner for crypto as well, CoinStash, right? They're incredible. So people can just take all the guesswork out of it now and just go, oh, okay, That's the one that Matt has recommended. They're fully vetted. I personally use them. And that's why it makes it so much easier coming into the community for people to understand what the next steps are going to be.
That's one of the things that I love about you is that you literally are talking about the high level problems that you have had to solve for yourself after going through not having any money, making a lot of money as a business owner, and then realizing, well, now I have a lot of problems because of all the money that I'm making. What are the solutions? And again, all the things that you normally talk about of SMSF, dematerializing, and why your conviction is so high on Bitcoin in itself, and why should people consider getting into it. After making millions of dollars and going through all the different investment vehicles that exist to create wealth, what's the most painful lesson you have had creating wealth?
There's been a lot of painful things, Nelson. With the most painful thing. The most painful thing, I think, is realizing that the government is actually not there to help you. Right? That is the number one pain point. And it's the taxes, it's understanding the landscape. So now you've got to actually employ, the best accountant that you could possibly find to help you navigate then all the tax structures. And so I was listening to someone recently and they said the number one investment you can make actually is in your government. So we have the luxury right now of actually packing up and moving to a different jurisdiction so we can alleviate and minimize the pain point of the government trying to steal your wealth. This has been one of the biggest things I think that people are talking about within the Bitcoin space is how can I obviously grow my wealth, but once I've grown my wealth, how can I protect it from being stolen and seized from a tyrannical government? And I think the unrealized capital gains tax by this insidious, toxic Labor Party has been a big wake-up call for a lot of Australians. I think for a long time we've sort of thought, we're happy to sort of pay taxes here and there, but when you're talking about stealing your wealth without even selling the asset, people have just had enough.
This is a this or that segment. So you just choose one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Sushi or steak?
Oh, steak.
Expert or jack of all trades?
Expert.
Product or service business?
Service.
CEO or founder?
Founder.
Instagram or TikTok?
Ooh. I'm going to go with TikTok.
TikTok or YouTube?
YouTube.
YouTube or Spotify?
YouTube.
Photos or videos?
Videos.
Short form or long form video content?
Long form.
Newsletter or podcasting?
Podcasting.
Organic or paid marketing?
Organic.
1 million followers with low conversions or 1,000 raving fans?
1,000 raving fans.
Remote talent or local talent?
Remote.
Building a talent or hiring a talent?
Hiring.
A talent at a high price tag or multiple cheap C talent?
The first one.
Property investing or shares?
Shares.
Shares or Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin or Solana?
Nothing beats Bitcoin.
Bitcoin or meme coins?
Bitcoin.
Super or SMSF?
SMSF.
Diversification or specialization?
Specialization.
Building a business or buying a business?
Buying a business.
Building a business on your own or business partnership?
Partnership.
Passion 6-figure business or stressful 8-figure business?
What was the first one?
Passion 6-figure business.
Oh, passion.
Sales or marketing?
Sales.
Rolex or Patek?
Ooh, Rolex.
Rolex or AP?
Rolex.
Rolex or Richard Mille?
Definitely Rolex.
Mercedes or Subi?
Ooh, you're pulling at the heartstrings there. Oh, I'm gonna go Subi.
I knew
Go
that
to
was the hardest.
Subaru. Come on.
Australia or Dubai?
I'm going to say Dubai.
Dubai or Cyprus?
Dubai.
Dubai or Bali?
Dubai.
Dubai or Thailand?
Dubai.
What are the three things that you will tell yourself in order to build a successful 8-figure investment portfolio?
First of all, get educated. Spend as much money as humanly possible on your self-education. I've already shared this story. It's the best investment that you could possibly make ever is in yourself. Find the people who are already steps ahead of you in the exact niche that you want to focus on, whether it be Bitcoin, property, business, and you will never ever lose. So that's the first thing. The other thing is going to be surround yourself with quality people who support you. This sounds simple, but it's absolutely fundamental. Don't surround yourself with brokies. If you're trying to become an 8-figure entrepreneur, get rid of everyone that's negative in your life that's telling you you can't do it or that's a stupid idea. No, delete them from your phone, delete them from your Instagram and focus on yourself. And lastly, back yourself. If you've got a great idea in a service-based business or a product-based business, back yourself. But also in that journey, there's many people I've spoken to who thought a product-based business was a great idea that I had to let them know it wasn't a great idea. So take the advice of people who are many steps ahead of you because no doubt they're going to have a really unique insight and ultimately will save you money and get you to where you need to be in record time. And it might just be through not that product-based business. It might just be through a different vehicle, but ultimately you will get there.
What's the worst investment advice you have ever received?
I can't really say I've had investment advice because I make up my own mind. I don't, even if someone was to suggest to me something, I guess if I think about it now in a bit more detail, it was probably the investment advice that I perhaps gave somebody else, which last decade now, some people are going to be shocked, probably, is I used to think Bitcoin was a scam. So I was telling people back then, don't invest in Bitcoin. That's a total scam. Invest, if you're going to do anything, invest in property. At least you can touch it, right? That was me last decade. Look, and I'm not ashamed to say it's just that was the mindset of a lot of people back then. Even the person I told you about before, Michael Saylor, who's become the #1 Bitcoin evangelist, even last decade, he was on the bandwagon of ignoring Bitcoin, thinking it was a total Ponzi scheme and just internet money and a pretend fake thing. He's now done a full circle and has become one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world, right? So what it is, Nelson, is get rid of your ego. When you realize that you've actually made a mistake, my mistake was not understanding Bitcoin sooner, accept it and tell people, say, yeah, I made a mistake. I've now learned more information about this asset and that's why I'm allocating to this asset. And I think other people will respect you for that, understanding that, yeah, you dropped the ego. Because a lot of people, Nelson, will say, well, they'll stick to it. I thought Bitcoin was a scam, and I don't want to backtrack on that. So I still have to keep saying that Bitcoin's a scam, even though they've got cash in the bank, it's all being debased right before their very eyes. You'll probably find that those people secretly own Bitcoin.
Opposite to that, what's the best investment advice you have ever received?
Well, invest in yourself. By far. I mean, I can go and tell someone now, go invest in Bitcoin. Sure, it's good. In my opinion, it's good advice. But then you might still invest in Bitcoin, but because you didn't get the right knowledge around Bitcoin, you might end up stuffing it up. And what I mean by that is you might not understand the asset. So when perhaps it does have a drawdown in the future, it might drop 50%, let's say, you then panic and you sell, not understanding that this is a normal part of the Bitcoin cycle and it's still going to bounce back and grow even further. But once you've sold it, you've taken the loss. That's a big mistake. And a lot of people do that because they don't understand the asset class. And it's not just Bitcoin. It can happen in the stock market as well. When the stock market goes down, people like to sell. And of course, when the stock market goes up, people like to buy. They need to completely flip that mindset. When the stock market or Bitcoin is low, buy as much as possible. And then if you want to sell, you then sell at the top. Now, I'm not saying sell Bitcoin, but if there is a time to sell, it would be when you're actually in profit and at all-time highs potentially, not when you're in the red and you're gonna realize a loss.
Brother, that was an awesome conversation, and hopefully it can prompt other business owners to start doing more research, to join your community, get a little bit more educated about it, hopefully even put some skin in the game and even some level of allocation to the asset if they haven't yet, and if they make up their own mind and think that this would be a great decision for themselves. Now, where can people find this community? How can they get in touch with you? How can they listen to your podcast or learn more about you and what you have to say?
Well, I think the number one place to go right now is YouTube. They can just simply type Matthew Fraser Crypto Collective. They'll find the YouTube channel, and even on in the description, they'll find a link to my online community, Crypto Collective. It's absolutely free to join. They can come in there, learn all they need to know about Bitcoin and other crypto assets. In fact, if they just do the Startup 101 crypto module that's in there, would literally take half a day to go through. If they can just simply absorb that information, they'll know more than 99% of information about Bitcoin than people on the planet, right? They'll also be around other like-minded people where they can share ideas, ask questions as well. And it really is the foundation for people's Bitcoin journey.
It has been a pleasure to have you here on the podcast and to be, at this point, partnered with you and helping you even further on that mission that you're on. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you share it with other founders and business owners. That's all we ask. Subscribe if you haven't, so you can get notified when we do have new episodes. And in order to bring more legends like Matt on the podcast, we do need your support by simply subscribing and sharing it with other people. Other than that, all the links will be down below. We'll see you on the next episode. Good vibes to everyone. How was that?
You tell me. It was good.
Yeah, that was cool. Hey legends, my goal with Founders Playbook is to help 1 million entrepreneurs build successful personal brands and businesses so that they can increase their impact and profits. You can support the mission by simply sharing the podcast with other founders and entrepreneurs, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and follow us on social media. Let's get to work.